How are you? That's disappointing. Oh, I had to binge the hell out of it. It was just too good. I've already watched it twice. Yeah. It goes by pretty fast.
All right, so let's do full desktop, and I'm going to switch to this banner that says Castlevania spoilers all over it. Spoilers everywhere. Spoilers. If you didn't know, we're going to spoil so much. We're spoiling all of Castlevania, spoiling it. So, Netflix Castlevania, it's going to get spoiled. Do not
put a spoiler on your spoiler.
Yeah, don't watch this. There will be spoilers. Spoilers for Netflix Castlevania. All right. Okay. So I watched Castlevania on Netflix on a whim because I like Castlevania video games, and I don't know, I was bored. It was a nice time to be bored in my life. And at first I was like, wow, this is terrible. Like, this is really bad. Like, season 1 was pretty bad. It was pretty rough. And I was like, by the end of season 1, though, I was like, I'm into this shit. But, like, Trevor was just a piece of shit character at the beginning, which I know that was the point, because the character arc is he's a piece of shit, and he's not going to be a piece of shit by the end, you hope. And I liked that. I mean, I just felt it was very heavy-handed, what a piece of shit he was.
He very much was the adventurer whose life had been put through hell.
Yeah. Like, everything's shit. I'm the most edgelord, but I'm also a drunk dullard. Like, that kind of thing. And I felt like Alucard was just the most Bishonen fanboy edgelord character of all time. And then Sylpha comes in, and you're like, what the fuck's going on with this character? I remember her from when I was like, I don't know, 11 years old. Castlevania 3 is where she comes from. And I was just like, I love the lore. I loved all that stuff. I loved how they handled Dracula. I loved the Vampire Hunter D vibes. Vampire Hunter D vibes for days on the Netflix Castlevania. And yeah, so it got me. It got its hooks into me by the end of season 1. And then season 2, arguably one of the most badass things I've ever seen. And I didn't think it'd get any cooler. And then season 3 came along. And I was like, and then they set you up for all this amazing shit. And then season 4 came along, and they were like, yeah, so remember all that amazing shit from season 3?
Wrap it up real quick.
Yeah, well, we're done, actually. We're done. It's like, remember this really cool thing that we started? They don't want to do that anymore. And you remember this really cool army? They're just going to fight this other cool army, even though they really had no intention of fighting each other. Remember this other thing?
It did seem kind of out of nowhere. Like,
yeah,
we had to ride boats over to get to this place, but now that we're here,
and it had that late Game of Thrones vibe, where it was like all this travel, like travel. Oh, traveling all the time. Oh, it's all about traveling. And then they're like, teleporters, baby. Everyone's got one. Everyone's got a fucking cell phone now.
You've unlocked fast travel.
Yeah, everyone's got a cell phone. Everyone's got a fucking teleporter. And yeah, I was watching it, and it broke my heart because I'm old enough to remember Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, the spinoff, which was actually better than
It
Buffy.
took forever to get anywhere.
Which was hey, Angel was better than Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
No, just their plot took forever to get anywhere.
If you ever wanted a TV show made about the world of darkness, that is Angel. But Angel was supposed to get 7 seasons. Buffy was only supposed to get 5, and they forced Buffy to have 7, and so seasons 6 and 7 of Buffy were trash. And then Angel was supposed to have like 7 seasons, but at season 5 they were like, fuck it, nobody watches this show. So like halfway through season 5, they had to tie up every loose end they had. That's what the entire season 4 of Castlevania felt like.
And
was
leave the most cliffhanger like ending to anything ever with the whole
with
end of the
them
world
running down the
happening.
alley. Yeah, they're running down the alley, and you're like,
I've
whatever
always wanted to
happened?
play the dragon, and then
Yeah.
like that's ends. It's like what?
Yep. So season 4 Castlevania had that feel. It was like, yeah, they told us we couldn't make any more Castlevanias. So rather than just you never finding out what happens, we're gonna just wrap up every fucking plot line that we have. And I am impressed by how well they did that. I adapted my brain to be accepting of the fact that they had to do that, and I was like, okay, well, they had to do that. You know, it is what it is. So, hey, what's up, Lex?
Hey, Lex.
Yeah, I was like, they have to do it, and I get it. I get why they have to do it. So, you know what? Let's just enjoy what we got here. I've been a DM that's run campaigns where you find out, like, yeah, man, I joined the military. I got to ship out. I won't be able to get to the end of the campaign. Or, my wife's having the baby. Won't be able to play D&D anymore. Or any number of things, right? I got my doctorate. Now I'm a doctor. I got to do doctor stuff. I can't play D&D anymore. So yeah, there's a lot of things that come up that make you end a campaign early, and you have to cut content, and you have to tie up loose ends, and you just have to say, you know what? It's the end now. And that was the vibe I got from like Castlevania Season 4. Like, Season 3 was so good, and it promised so much, and then Season 4 came along and was like, it's over, bro. But it's over in the best and classiest way that we could provide. So I did like that quite a bit. So I don't know what the reasoning was for it, why they decided to do 4 seasons instead of 5. Makes me sad. But
to me, it honestly felt like it was setting up for like 6 seasons.
Oh, yeah.
As they were going.
Yeah, like there was so much potential. There was so much good lore building and going on there. So many cool characters. Yeah.
I mean, they left off with was it not Saint Germain? Is that his name?
Yeah.
I mean, the way it was left off, you thought he would have been gone for a while, but here he is right back at it.
Right. Yeah. I was talking to my wife about it. I was like, yeah, like this guy, he goes missing at the end of last season, and then he fucking immediately shows up at the beginning of the next season, and you know, like there's no time has passed. There's no what happened. It's just here's everything. We just shove it in your face. There was other parts of season 4 that I felt didn't respect the lore of the world, but I don't really want to go into that per se, because I mean, I understand why they made the decisions that they made. But like Isaac, for example, part of his backstory is that he was a dark-skinned character, and he was mistreated and enslaved for being a dark-skinned character. And then in season 4, like half the new characters were all dark-skinned characters living in Gothic Horror Europe, and they didn't have any problems at all. And it's like, what part of Gothic, what part of Gothic Europe was Isaac from that he had to deal with it? Yeah, like I don't understand. Like what happened?
I almost think somebody complained too much.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I appreciate the show Shadow and Bone. I feel like the diversity and the representation of all different races and cultures. I think that it was really, really well done. And I think that that's where fantasy probably needs to be at right now. But I just felt like, why bother? You only had 1 season left. Like, why break the lore that you've already established? That there's a bunch of racist people that, you know, enslaved Isaac and his people for being dark skinned, and you just kind of threw all that out the window. I kind of felt like they threw a lot of Isaac stuff out the window, and Isaac was such a great character, and they just kind of were like,
even within his stuff, the first couple episodes.
Yeah.
Like he's talking about the creatures actually. They started building on this whole plot that the night creatures actually had
souls, right? Like their human soul was still there somewhere, which I thought was a pretty cool idea. And I was like, cool, let's see where that's going. And then I started to realize, oh no, this is the last season. We'll never find out where that's going. The guy is going to eat his berries, and that's it. Another thing that I really appreciate about season 4 is death. I did not see Barmy being death until Barmy was dead. And I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good at seeing shit coming. But man, they played Barmy as such a piece of shit that I was like, what? And then he went through the portal, like it was nothing. And then Saint Germain's like, oh, it's you. And he's still dismissive of the guy, but he's not so dismissive as to be surprised that Barmy came through. But even Saint Germain is like, the fuck is this? And then I was like, the fuck is this?
And then when he opened the port or the protective barrier, he's like, I got this.
And then when Death didn't stop being Barmy, that's when I was like, that's dope.
That was
like,
his voice.
like when Death was like, I'm gonna eat your fucking soul, shit it out, and smother your fucking girlfriend with it. I was like, did Death just say that? Is that Death's dialogue? Like, Death, like the Grim Reaper is, what a potty mouth. You know what I'm saying? You don't picture the fucking Death talking like that. Like, I was like, are you a bad guy from one of my D&D campaigns? Like, who the fuck are you, bro? Like, I was really impressed, honestly.
Yeah. But it's funny you say that, because now that I've gone back and watched it, when you hear him in the beginning, when he's talking about the death that was owed.
Yeah.
He there's a few times he hints at that, and you have no idea about the deeper implication about that until he's like, oh,
I'm sure, yeah. I want to watch the whole series from start to finish, like all 4 seasons, and kind of try to pick up the stuff. Also, the biggest inconsistency in season 4, there were a lot of inconsistencies, but the biggest one is when Alucard is peeing, he pulls up his zipper.
There's no zipper.
I was like, what?
There are flaps and
I
buttons,
mean,
and that's about it.
Vampire Hunter D, I get it. Like, vampires have advanced technology and science or whatever. But are you telling me that Alucard has had a zipper on his fucking pants this whole time? Like, is that what you're telling me? And he's not sharing that technology with the rest of the world? I mean, that's pretty fucked up. But yeah, I was like, he zipped his pants. Like, what? You don't zip your pants? Like, that's ridiculous. All right, so now that we got all the spoiler stuff out of the way, this is what I see in Castlevania that I want to see in a D&D campaign that I can't see in a D&D campaign. Last night, without too many spoilers, in Odyssey, Philippocles and Anna, they're trapped inside the thing, right? And he's like, can I give up my action to throw Anna out of the thing? And like, raw, probably not. I mean, I could have ruled Anna is an improvised weapon, and then he does like an improvised weapon throw or whatever, right? But he's still got to beat the thing, the checks and all that. Like, yeah, we could finesse it in there, but is there like a raw solution? There never seems to be. Like, there never seems to be a fucking raw solution. So obviously that's the dopest shit in the whole world, right? Like, you're doing something selfless to help a teammate. You're really strong. Of course you could throw your person out of the thing. You know what I'm saying? But, right, like shove action, right? Like, there's things that you could do, right?
Losing.
Yeah, but I didn't want like fucking Hercules basically to just push a bird woman 5 feet. Right? Like, that doesn't make sense. He's fucking Hercules. You know what I'm saying? And she's a fucking bird person. Like, if he pushes her or throws her, she's gonna go the distance. You know what I'm saying? And, like, that's kind of where I'm starting to get with this shit, Like, in Odyssey, right, I am starting to really try, at least, to lean into these tropes. Like, Reset is fast, right? So if she wants to do something fast, I'm gonna probably just be like, you do it, right? And like Hypatia is smart, right? So if Hypatia wants to do something smart, I'll just be like, you do it, right? Philippocles is strong, so strong, and so on and so forth. Like, I'm trying to kind of narrow in. Like, if your character Cyrus wants to do something related to hunting monsters, he's the goddamn Slayer. Like, I think he should just be able to do things related to hunting monsters, right?
He's designed to be a combat strategist type guy.
Right. So like,
not book smart, but tactics smart.
I wanna lean into these tropes, right? Yeah. So like, 5e is very simple, right? And that's what makes it so good, because it's very accessible and it's very easy to teach people, right? Take this golf ball, roll it, get a high number. That's the game. That's the game. Take this golf ball, roll it, get a high number. That's 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Yeah, there's some other stuff at work here, but honestly, it comes down... Sometimes you'll roll 2 of these golf balls. That's it. Sometimes you roll 2 golf balls. Sometimes you roll 1. You're just trying to get a high number. That's it. That's the game. But, like, it just feels so limited, right? Like, I want Philippocles to be able to throw people really fucking far. I want Hypatia to be able to just do the fucking nerdiest shit that you see from, like, you know, like action movies where the nerd character's like, don't worry guys, I've hacked into the back end of the alien spaceship's defense systems using my smartphone. You know, and you're like, that's impossible. But then as the audience, you're like, but she's really smart. I guess it could work.
It's
right.
One of those, I've seen it done in, what game I think? Exalted.
Exalted is World of Darkness, games. Though. Exalted is World of Darkness.
You're right, that is. You're absolutely right, that is.
Right.
That storyline mechanic where it is storyline driven more so.
And then you watch the fights in Castlevania. None of those not a single fucking fight could be recreated in 5e. Right? Like, none of the fights. Like, what does his chain even do? Right? We don't even fucking know what this magic chain does. Sometimes it's a whip, sometimes it's a chain, sometimes it's a Kusurigama, sometimes it's 150 feet long. Like, sometimes it's a lasso, sometimes it's, you know, he swings with it. Like, sometimes he makes like a fucking sphere of like chain around himself to defend himself. What's even fucking going on with this shit? You know what I'm saying?
Like, it's like the rule of cool taken to the umpth degree.
Right. Everything about Castlevania on Netflix was rule of cool, right? Like, when did Alucard ever turn into a wolf other than just to look dope in battle? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He's like, yeah, I'll turn into some bats and I'll turn into a wolf and then I'll hit him with my sword. And it's like, was there any benefit at all to turning into bats or a wolf? Nah. No, not at all. Not at all. Right, exactly. Lex points out in chat, like Captain America's shield, right? What's going on with that shit? Vibranium? We don't even know. It just works. It just does it. You know, I throw my shit, I block shit. I don't know. I bounce it off of you and I catch it again.
Technically, a vibranium should absorb the impact of whatever it hits.
Yeah, you throw a vibranium shield, it should immediately fall on the ground because it absorbs all force around it. It can't actually be affected by force, right?
Right, it absorbs all impact.
Yeah, what they're thinking of is the other movie element, flubber. That's what Captain America's shield is made out of. It's made out of fucking flubber.
Flubanium.
So, yeah, but it would sound dumb if we said that the shield was made out of flubber. Somehow vibranium sounds less stupid. Slightly less stupid. Where I'm going with this is, I want... And I honestly think World of Darkness is the only way to do this. I want, in a fight, for you to be able to say, yo, this is my character. They're really good with weapons. And I'm just like, cool. And they're like, don't you want to hear what kind of weapons I'm good at? And I'm like, nah, you said you're good at weapons. I believe you. That's it. That's it. Like, you go with fucking weapons. Well, how good are you? Fine, tell me how good you are. I have 5 out of 5 points in weapons. And I'm like, well, you're the best in the fucking world. The end. Yeah.
That's World of Darkness right there.
Like your first level character shows up and you tell me I'm the best fucking swordsman in the world, right? And I look at your character sheet and I see you have 5 points in weapons, and I'm like, I guess you are. Right? You come at me in 5e and you say, my first level fighter is the best swordsman in the whole world. And I'm like, are you though? I mean, what, you got a 17 strength and a +2 proficiency, you got +5? I mean, fucking goblins get a +5. I mean, that's what you're bringing to the table? Is +5? Like, that's what you got? You're not the best at anything. I mean, you're above average. Maybe. You know? Like, I want... Yeah, I want people to be able to show up and be like, so my character's mastered ice magic. And I'm like, cool. And I'm like, don't you want to know what that means? It's like, no, I want to find out. Let's play the game and find out. And they just, you know, they just busted out crazy ice shit. Like Sylpha or whatever, right? She's like, maxed out elemental ice and elemental fire. Like, that bitch doing all kinds of stuff. She like, yeah, I watched Avatar too, look. And she's like flying around with like fire jets and making like giant buzzsaws out ice and
is it just me, or does it seem like she learned lightning out of nowhere?
Lightning is a type of fire. Again, I feel like they just kind of cribbed like all her stuff in season 4 was just they were like, just take everything from Avatar, just take everything.
Oh, it wasn't a complaint. I just was curious if anybody else noted, like, she used it any other time. Like,
I don't remember her doing lightning outside of season 4 now. So, yeah. Like, what I like is the idea. Like, I was watching. The problem with season 4 also is I kept thinking about this campaign, and I kept thinking about building encounters like this, right? And I kept thinking like, how would I achieve what I'm seeing on the screen right now with 5th edition D&D? And I was like, I can't get that to happen, right? So like in World of Darkness, in Exalted, if I were to send 100 Darklings or Hell dudes, I don't know what the fuck are they called, Dark ones, whatever the monsters are in Castlevania, the ones that are raised from the dead, the Hell, the monsters, right? So if I had 100 of the if I had 100 of those show up,
Night Beasts, what they call them.
Night Beasts, thank you. If we had 100 Night Beasts show up in D&D, it doesn't matter if they're the shittiest Night Beasts in the whole world. It doesn't matter if we even used minion rules from 4th edition. That fight would take a while, right? But
likely we'd lose.
Yeah, you could use World of Darkness / Exalted's combat system, right? To be like, okay, what are you gonna do? And they're like, I'm gonna use my weapon skill 5 and my ice skill 5. And I'm gonna just make a bunch of fucking ice knives just rain down, and I'm gonna be surrounded by a buzzsaw of ice, and it's gonna be crazy.
I got Protean 5, so I can move at the speed of freaking light.
Right. And it's like, okay, that sounds dope. You got anything else? And they're like, yeah, I'm gonna burn charges from this thing, and it's gonna buff my ice magic pool. And then I'm gonna activate this thing that I've been storing up forever, and it's gonna buff my magical, my fighting ability, so that I get to attack twice this turn. And I'm like, oh my god, you get to attack twice this turn. Okay, well you have a dice pool of 14 dice, and you're gonna roll it twice. That's 28 dice. And I just said, okay, let's go for it, because the number of successes you get, that'll be number of successes times 3. Will be how many night creatures you kill. And then they roll, and out of like 28 dice, they get a couple of 10s, maybe a couple of 1s, but they mostly get the successes that they need. And they're like, cool, I got a total of 15, right? And I'm like, wow, 15, you just killed 45 dudes. Tell me how you killed those dudes. Like, that's how a Castlevania encounter would be run on tabletop. And then after your turn is over, then the bad guys go, right? And the bad guys don't act independently as individual little bad guys, right? Like, you roll them as a horde. You're like, well...
Except for demi-bosses.
Right, exactly. Like, I don't know.
I understand exactly what you're trying to implement.
Yeah.
It's almost like you would have to go away. You would essentially have to do World of Darkness.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
I feel like a storytelling system is the answer.
Or using if you want more like anime style shit, then go with Exalted, because they have more mystical type such things. But check out Dark Age, World of Darkness, Dark Age. Mm-hmm. It is literally the medieval period rules and stuff. For World of Darkness, it's that era. Mm-hmm. So powers are a little more amped up because you're dealing with the bloodlines are a little more pure at that time for vampires and werewolves and all that stuff. Mysticism is a little more live and well. So that's just an option.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
and most of the stuff you should be able to find like PDFs of now. So
well, I went and got the World of Darkness. I guess it's the most recent book that's like the general book. Like, it kind of stuffs everything into one thing.
And the setting period.
Yeah. And like the first 180 pages of this 400-page book or something are just mechanics. It's just like the system itself and how to make the system work.
Yep.
So I can't decide if I should go all in for World of Darkness system or if I should just make a simpler version that we use specifically for this campaign. Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is implementation of a essentially a pool, essentially a specialization pool.
Mm-hmm.
So like a set number of dice that have like, say whatever level they are, their number of dice might jump up to start with D6s, jump up to D8s, jump up to whatever that they can use to cinematically add whatever their specialization is.
Well, right, because World of
Cool
Darkness
roll.
specialization costs like an additional point, but the point isn't as expensive as leveling it all the way. And you could say, I'm an expert with weapons, but I'm specialized in katanas or whatever. And so as
Well,
long as you're using katana, you have an extra die to your dice pool from being a specialist on top of everything else. So...
well, I mean, it could be just make every character choose what is their specialization, which makes their character unique.
Right,
And make
right.
that their
what
they have
you
to
mean without
incorporate
doing a full-on World of Darkness thing?
right. It
Yeah.
won't just modify.
You just say like what
Roll
makes your
20.
character unique or special or whatever, and then
they get this pool of dice that they can either exchange for an extra action or to
Yeah.
boost up an attack. And essentially, you could decide, okay, well, starting off, these are D6s. Then your pool jumps up to D8s at some point, depending how epic you guys get.
Yeah, that could be a way to stay within the 5e wheelhouse for sure.
If you want to stay within that wheelhouse. If you wanted to go full bore in the World of Darkness, that's not a bad option, especially for, like you said, you're doing a medieval horror and you're kind of straying away from you kind of wanted to stay away from some of the other D&D races that aren't horror based anyway.
True.
So that would kind of, you still got a little bit of everything because you got the Fae, you get with the Changeling, you got Hunters, that actually is one of the groups. So that's regular humans who are monster hunters that know about things.
Right. Well, I wouldn't take any of the actual World of Darkness like races and stuff. I'm just after I don't want any of their lore and I don't want any of their stuff. I just want like their system. Like I don't think that the lore of the system's bad, but I'm working on my own stuff. I just want a system that would support that kind of thing. Like I want to just be able to say, yeah, you're in a forest and you're fighting, and now you're fighting in the trees, and everyone's just up in the trees fighting because it's super dope. And like, I just feel like in 5e, if you did that, people would be like, well, how am I up in the tree? And do I need to make an acrobatics check to stay in the tree? And
especially somebody who's played 5e before.
Right, like, do I fall out of the tree? And do I need to do an athletics check to jump from this branch to that branch? It's like, nah, dog, I just want everybody to be in the goddamn trees right now. You know what I'm saying?
Don't worry about the hell, just that's where we are.
Like, well, what if I get knocked down? And it's like, we'll deal with that when it happens. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Like, a return to, like, a storytelling-based, even through combat would be more exciting. Like, okay, so the monster hits you, and rather than rip your head off like it's done to every peasant that it's attacked, it knocks you out of the tree. Now you're falling out of the tree. What do you do about that? And then they just do something about it. So if they're playing like Trevor, they're like, well, I'm going to use my strength and my weapon skill, and I'm gonna whip a tree branch. I'm gonna swing back onto the branch, and you're like, fantastic. And then Alucard's like, I just turned to fucking bats. Like, what do you think I do? Jesus. Right. And then like Cypher's like, oh, I just shoot fire out of my hands and then just back onto a tree branch, and you're like, amazing. Okay, cool. And then they roll their stuff, and if they get enough successes, they succeed. If they get a lot of successes, they succeed with benefits. And if they don't get enough successes, they fail, possibly with consequences.
I had to love how the heroes, like, how they made them so the hero, just the fact of, you watch these guys, and these people getting, all the non-named people are getting decapitated and disemboweled and whatever. In the meantime, Belmont's been shot with spikes about 12 times, and he's still walking like it's nothing.
Well, yeah, it's indicative of, a hit point system to a certain extent, and being a hero and all that kind of stuff.
It just made me laugh. It just was like, what would be lethal to everyone else is like, he's like, that's a mild inconvenience.
The other thing I liked about Castlevania was you never knew what bad guy or what monster was gonna just fucking own, right? Like, yeah, like, oh, it's fucking Godzilla. They're like, we kill it instantly. And then you've got like a random dude that could phase through walls and has spikes on his head, and that takes forever. And I kind of liked that because it kind of had a nod to like the RNGesus elements of it, right? Like, a tabletop game is still a tabletop game. As long as there are dice, RNGesus is sitting at the table with you. So, yeah, like, Alucard had this amazing success where he threw his sword into the dragon's throat and stopped it from breathing its breath weapon and slowed it down so everybody could escape. Super duper badass, right? Meanwhile, Trevor's upstairs getting his ass kicked by some random scrub because he just can't seem to get them rolls. Like,
and he wasn't even a tough guy because he ended up freaking just putting his fist.
You play enough D&D, you are gonna run into that one goblin who cannot be stopped, who just keeps critting, and nobody can land a hit because RNGesus. So I did like that in the show. Like, Alucard fights one of these spider monsters, and it takes forever. Later, he kills like 2 spider monsters like it's nothing, which to me kind of is indicative of rapid level up, obviously, because season 4 was a mess. But also, also just RNG. Like, sometimes you're just kicking ass. Sometimes you get your ass kicked. So,
I mean, I can very much see almost. You ever play Shadows of Mordor?
I have not, but that's the Assassin's Creed game that takes place in Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
The
rival system there. That's what it kind of reminds me of. It's like that one goblin you couldn't beat. Like, even when you do defeat him, you don't kill him. He like stumbles away or whatever.
Yeah.
And then comes back later, like a couple, even worse.
Like, looking at chat, Dufam puts in 5e. I don't think is a good system for this setting, as it is a total fail or succeed system. I think a system that would be a partial failure or succeed system would be good. I 100% agree. Matt Colville did a good video about partial success. Especially if you're doing a one-on-one adventure. You can't have fail or nothing, right? Fail or success with a one-on-one game, because they fail and then that's the end. Okay, they're dead. All right, well, pack it up. We're done. You have to have like failing into success, failing forward, I think is what he called it in the video. It was failing forward. Like, you fail, but, and that fails, but, and then this fails, but, and we're kind of there with Giffyglyphs succeed at a cost. We're kind of there with Giffyglyphs succeed at a cost. Like, I think for me, that succeed at a cost is so tasty, so delicious, because it reminds me of systems where you could partially succeed. Edge of the Empire, and I think even Warhammer Fantasy, and World of Darkness. Those are all dice pool succeed at a cost-based systems, or partial success systems. And I like that. I believe, and it's been a long time since I read the rules, I believe in Edge of the Empire, you could fail and be like, nah, dog, I succeed. And then that gives the game master a die that they can use later to sabotage you or your allies. Because
that's the Marvel game. I played that. That was ridiculous. Like,
yeah,
it's like you could step it up and like it would give a die to the GM to use. But it's like essentially you roll a critical, they get a boost. They roll a critical, you can then take a boost.
Yeah, like
it's crazy.
For this next game, I don't think I have it in me to run another 5th edition D&D game. Even with Giffyglyphs Darker Dungeons, I think I'm going to be over that, because I'm experiencing it as a player on Wednesdays, as a player when I have a chance to play Paradise Vale, which I've stepped down from so that I could be like an arbiter of lore and stuff for the setting. But I help with that. I run that occasionally. I run every Sunday Giffyglyphs Darker Dungeons shit, and then I play it every Wednesday. I think that's enough for me. Like, I want something more. than that even has to offer. Like, I want a story to be told, you know? Like, I want everything to have a chance to be reactionary, you know? Like, you open the closet, give me, you know, like, give me your wits plus your perception or whatever. Oh, you failed the check so bad that you don't see the undead marionette until it's on your face, right? And now we're in combat. And now, like, okay, you see so-and-so's got this marionette on the face. What do? Well, I'm going to shoot it off their face with my flintlock. And it's like, okay. And they're like, I'm going to use my aim. Yeah, aim plus firearms. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be like, well, it's on their face. It's small. I'm going to need X number of successes, blah, blah, blah. And then they roll for it, and they come just shy of the mark. Does that mean they miss? No, no, no. They killed the marionette, but they also shot their friend in the fucking face. Like, if I tried to pull that shit as a game master in 5e, there would be a post about me on Nightmare, RPG horror stories. Like, you won't believe what my 5th edition Dungeon Master did to me. When I tried to shoot this thing off of my friend's face, which, by the way, it didn't even make a grapple attempt to get onto his face. And then when it was on his face and I went to shoot it off, I didn't get the number that I needed to hit. And he actually said I succeeded, but then he punished me for succeeding by saying I shot my friend in the face. Can you believe this guy? And it's like, but yeah, that's exactly what I want. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, that's what I want to happen. Like,
yeah.
I want there to be more happening, you know? Like, that's what I want. I want to have, when Carmilla was fighting those minions, and there were so many minions that she was in a fucking swimming pool of blood. A swimming pool of blood. Like, the staircase leading to her room was a waterfall. There was so much blood. I want that. I want that. Like, how do I even do that in 5e, right? Like, do I say, like, well, every dead body's difficult terrain, so there's that, and, you know, like, we just leave everybody on the board, because we can shuffle tokens now, so, like, could leave everybody on the board and just be like, hey, when you die, you're difficult terrain. I mean, that was, like, my whole 4e thing, was, like, leaving things on the board, and they became difficult terrain, because 4e was so grid-based and tactical.
I remember.
Yeah, so, like...
I remember.
Yeah, so, like, that could work, you know? I don't know. Like... I just feel like we need something more. I want someone to be able to go in, right? This happens in D&D 5th edition D&D all the time, and I always say no, and I always feel like an asshole afterwards, right? Like, they come in and they're like, well, I've got shape water, and you said that the whole room's full of blood, right? Can I use shape water on the blood? And honestly, to try to keep 5e from fucking falling apart because it's so poorly balanced, I have to be like, no, I'm sorry. The spell specifically says water. I'm sorry. And they're like, but let's look it up. And then we look it up, and Sage Advice, Jeremy Crawford, they're like, are you crazy? Blood's not water. If we meant blood, we would have said it in the spell description. I want to be able to say, of course you could fucking control the blood. That's the dopest shit ever. Yes. Make it rise up and turn into a giant scythe and kill 20 dudes. I want to see it.
Try to pull the Katara and do like the swamp tribe who bends the water inside the plants, because
right.
all water saturated plants.
And here, for those of you who have not played World of Darkness or dice pool based system, here's how it would work. I would say, I don't know, man. Let's find out, right? So you roll your water skill or water magic skill or whatever the fuck it is, right? And then you roll your will, right? Your stat. And you take your 4 will and your 4 water skill. Now you have 8 dice. You roll those dice, and the more successes you have, the better the thing you tried to do is. Right? So yeah, I created a scythe out of blood, and I swung it, but I only got 1 success out of potentially 16 successes. Because if you roll a 10 on a d10, you get 2 successes. So technically 8 dice. If you were the luckiest person in the fucking world, you could have gotten 16 successions. So you got 1 success out of, you know, however many successes you could have got. I'll say you swing it, you do manage to catch like one of the guys, rips him open, he's dead, or you slash him open, he's taking some damage, but he's still going. Well, you bust out like, oh shit, I just got 10 successes. I'm gonna be 10 successes. All right, here's how it goes down. Like he summoned this giant scythe of blood and slashes through, cuts like half the dudes in half. Like, that's what a dice pool system allows you to do. It allows you to. It's more work.
So much
I will say
narrative.
this: it is so much more work for the DM, and it requires so much more trust from the players. Like, that's part of why those systems are not very popular, I think, because I'm not trying to call anybody out, I'm not trying to throw shade, but I don't think there's enough DMs who are skilled enough to run a good game with a storytelling dice pool based system. I feel like they're either going to be impartial, they're going to have their own vision or idea of how things should go. They're going to lack the improv skills to just sort of tell that story as it's happening, right? That you have to be able to look at the dice pool and look at what's happening and read it like a fucking deck of tarot cards. You have to look at it and be like, okay, you could have had this many successes, but you got this many successes, and you're trying to do this thing, and this is what's happening in the room, so this is probably what would happen, right? But you have to be able to do that instantly. You have to be able to instantly keep doing that shit over and over and over and over again. There is a reason why 5e is right now like the king of tabletop systems, because it's all black and white. It's all there for you. There are things that you have to interpret. Yes, there are plenty of opportunities where you have to improv, you have to make tough calls on the fly, but it's also the world's most popular role-playing game. As I said earlier, if we don't agree on something, we can look up in 30 seconds or less a sage advice article that answers the fucking question. With a narrative-based dice pool-driven system, you have to trust that your dungeon master is there to help you tell a badass story. And the dungeon master needs to be there to tell a badass story. And the other thing that complicates that is, obviously in a horror game, that people need to be scared. But if the DM has always got your back and is always cheering for you and you trust them, how do you also trust them to scare you? How do you also trust them to harm you, right? It's, I'm not trying to make it sexual, but you're in like an S&M relationship at that point, right? Like, you want to be scared, you want to be hurt, but you also need to know that the dungeon master's not going to go too far. The dungeon master's just not going to straight up kill your character because they get caught up in what's going on, right? If your character dies in a story-driven, dice pool-fueled game, it is because the dice...
They willed it so.
Willed it so, right? Like, I have to look down at the board and say, all right, big boss man, he swung on you. He got 10 successes. You went to deflect. You used your ice magic and your speed to try to set up an ice barrier and get out of the way. Let's see what happened here. You got 0 successes. I mean, what do you fucking think happened?
I'm sorry.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, like, there you go.
No matter how much I want to save you, no matter how much I narratively could have thought of how to pull you out, the dice have spoken. You have failed.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Like, and Doofan brings up a good point, again. I like the system, these systems, more than 5e, but the field of people that want to play is not that big. Mixing both the hardest parts of play to do horror, and like a storytelling system. Yeah. Like, this is a challenge. This is a game that I think I will be able to find players for. I think I'll be able to find players for. I mean, I had like 20 people apply for Mythic Odyssey, so and that straight up was like, you don't get feats, you have to eat shoes, you don't get items, you're naked the whole time. Like, in the ad for Mythic, I was like, it's going to be the worst experience of your life, and I still had people sign up for it. So I think I'll definitely be able to find people that want to play this and want to try it out and trust me enough as a storyteller to help me tell a story in the setting and experience the setting. But I agree, if I was where I was at 2+ years ago, where I needed to do paid DMing as my part-time job to pay bills, because, you know, we had, you know, stuff happened in our family and we needed additional money and I needed to get a part-time job, and that was the whole thing about doing paid DMing, was to kind of do that. Like, if I was in a situation where I needed to find players and I needed to keep seats filled, this would not be the kind of game that I would run. I would run a 5th edition game on Roll20, because it's the top game on the top platform. Doesn't matter if it's not the best platform or the best game. being the top doesn't mean that you're necessarily the best. Yeah, so like that's what I would do. But I'm in a unique situation where honestly, when Skull and Shackles ended, I was gonna have my Thursday nights back. I wasn't going to run another game. I was just gonna run my 2 Odyssey games and maybe, I don't know, play video games, paint miniatures, go on hikes, enjoy my life, you know, that kind of thing. But I had this idea for a Castlevania inspired game, right? And I wanted to tell a story in that same genre, in that same way, and that's where I'm at right now, and that's why I'm going to do it. So for me, this is, you know, it's, yeah. Is it sustainable? Probably not. Could other people take what I'm doing and manage to find a group and do it? Probably not. Yeah. Also in the storytelling system, you could go too far without knowing it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, when the rules are loose, it becomes a lot easier to get off track, right? For example, the reason that you aren't allowed to control blood with any water-based spells in 5e is because everyone would do it all the time, right? Everyone would do it all the time. Like, oh yeah, I heat up the blood in that guy's body and I instantly kill him. And it's like, okay, well that sucks. Like, I guess you killed him, right? Like, oh, I use my blood powers. I pull all the blood out of his body. It's like, well, he's dead because you pulled all the blood out of his body. Like, you allow these things to happen once in D&D, and they're going to keep happening over and over again in D&D. The idea is that you have to create an entire game, an entire atmosphere that supports that style of play, right? So if the main character has the ability to boil your blood, right? Because the DM said, oh yeah, boiling blood, that's dope. Yeah, you use your will and your water mastery abilities. Let's see if you boil this guy's blood.
Just remember, somebody else can do it to you too.
Right, exactly. Like, okay, well now we know that this is a thing that happens in the goddamn world, right? So how do we mitigate somebody having their blood boiled, right? So they would do their natural toughness, well, I don't know, whatever resistance to magic they might have. You have to get more successes than they do to see if you can affect them. Maybe you only get one success after the defenses kick in. The DM's like, well, you start to heat up their blood, but you don't instantly kill them. You slow them down and they feel sick, but now they're going to fight you. Like, these are all things that have to be interpreted on the fly, right? There's not a super strict way of interpreting them in a storytelling dice pool based system. And I don't know. I think that's okay, right? But I also understand why these kind of games are not popular, right? Yeah. Oh, right. Another good point. There are also players that don't always know what their limits are, so when they reach it, they freak out in the moment. That is a fair point as well, right? Because they get drunk on the power of storytelling. This is something you encounter with first-time D&D players a lot. First-time D&D players a lot. You either get the people who have no idea what to do, or you have the people that they're like, I've seen anime. I know what to do. Right, so like you get those kids that show up and they're like, okay, I'm level 1, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take 5 arrows. There's five goblins, right? I'm gonna take 5 arrows out and I'm gonna fire all 5 arrows at once, each arrow going in the eyeball of one of those goblins. And you're like, okay, you may fire 1 arrow. That is level 1 Dungeons and Dragons. You may fire 1 arrow. And they're like, well, that's stupid. I want to fire 5 arrows. It's like, yes, but you can't, right? And then in the storytelling system, you might be tempted, right, at low level to say, oh yeah, 5 arrows? That's dope as fuck. Yeah, definitely fire 5 arrows. You have to understand that just because you're playing in a storytelling system, and just because anything could happen, storytelling system, dice pool, you can't go season 4 in episode 1 of season 1, right? That's the other thing that a storytelling dice pool based dungeon master has to know, right? Is pacing. Once you okay something dope they're going to want to be dope like that all the time, right? So you have to be able to say, like, currently, you're just not that good, right? Currently, you're just not that good. But if the person is like, well, I mean, I have 5 ranks in archery and specialization in trick shots. It's like, all right, you know what? I mean, even though this is the beginning of the campaign, I will certainly allow you to fire 2 arrows at once, right? Because of all these incredible ranks and specializations and how you build your character. Over time, we will build towards cooler and cooler and cooler shit. Now, Stonewolf had mentioned Exalted earlier, which is the anime fantasy version of World of Darkness. They actually have entire skill trees for doing dope-ass shit like that. There's literally a fire magical heat-seeking arrows tree that you can put points into.
The most ridiculous ability I know from there is the obsidian butterflies, which you can then pick up and sell that obsidian because you literally just created.
Yeah. Well, the point of Exalted is that you are gods, basically. Like, you are basically gods in Exalted.
And then they also have their system Scion, which you literally are sons of gods.
Yeah, so... yeah, it's a difficult balance, though, right? Because the stronger you are, the less likely you are to be scared of anything, right? And if we're trying to do a horror game, part of what made the Giphy Darker Dungeon appealing for a horror game was you're going to be scared all the time because you're going to be out of resources, survival horror, right? The whole deal. So the question we have to ask is, are we running a survival horror, like gritty, I don't have anything, I'm afraid to use my ammo because I might not ever get ammo again, that's why I'm scared? Or are we exploring horror in a different way, in a am I the monster? Like, what kind of horror can I withstand before I give into like the darkness kind of thing? Like, what kind of horror game is it, right? Like, if Castlevania is the inspiration for this campaign, I feel like it's the latter, right? Because it was never about not having enough resources. It's about remaining true to yourself in a world that is so fucking terrible that it would just be easier to give up. It would be easier to give in. I don't feel like that's bad, right? I don't feel like that's a bad way to run a horror game at all. Like, you could be afraid of the things that you encounter. You could be afraid of the things that you see. You could be afraid of the things that happen to you and to the people in the game that you care about. You could be afraid of what you are capable of. You could be afraid of what you are turning into. Right? Yeah. So there's different ways to run a horror game. The one thing I don't like in storytelling system are that they give players plot points that can let them really railroad stuff. Like, we could have multiple types of these stories with different campaigns. That's true too. If we're building out this world, there's no rule that says you couldn't just run a bunch of peasants from Vone who are in a survival horror situation. Like, they are playing in Giffyglyphs Darker Dungeons, and they are just seriously, honest to God, trying to survive because they are a bunch of scrubs in a horrifying setting, just trying to get their shit together. And at the same time, you could run a World of Darkness style game where everyone is a vampire and they're trying to stop the Dreadlord from making a pact with some ancient horror.
While trying to keep their humanity.
While trying to not succumb to that same temptation that their mistress has succumbed to. You can tell all sorts of stories within a world, and that's a sign that you're building a good world, is that it can support not only different types of stories, but different methods of telling that story. One thing that I will always give props to Paizo for, Skull and Shackles is ridiculously homebrewed at this point, but it is still the Shackles. Like, it is still the world of Golarion. It is still that tiny area called the Shackles from Golarion. When I need information, I go to their Wikipedia and I look up, like, rum butter. Like, oh, what's the town of rum butter? Oh, it's like this. Okay, they have bees. Like, they have made a world that I felt was a good enough world that I still use it as the skeleton for my entire homebrew campaign for Skull and Shackles. Yeah, exactly. Like a Justinian focused campaign could just be a dark fantasy 5e vanilla game. Like you could just run it in the same setting, but that would be the focus. So, yeah, like I don't know. For me, for the story that I want to tell, a Castlevania-esque story where you're playing as supernatural creatures or supernatural adjacent creatures that are still subjected to horror, still subjected to fear, still trying to succeed in a horrifying and terrifying world. I feel like a Castlevania type game would benefit from a narrative, story-driven, dice pool fueled game for sure. So that is like the whole point of this conversation, I guess, is to justify that that's kind of the direction I want to go mechanically with this. What it does mean is that design-wise, when I'm designing like the races and the classes and the weapons and things like that, like I need to consider, would we have a D&D flavored version of like this? If there was a source book, right? Would there be a D&D flavored version of the source book? Would there be a World of Darkness flavored version of the source book? Do you just present the races and you say, if you were playing 5e, you could substitute this for this race, and then you just kind of move on with it? Like, that's the kind of stuff that needs to be maybe sorted out. Like, I want to keep building the world, but eventually I will have to settle on mechanical stuff for the world. And at that point, there's no marketability whatsoever in doing anything related to Worlds of Darkness. Like, nobody wants that shit. So for my own personal stuff,
but they're coming out with a new video game for them recently.
I know, but just the demographics so small. The demographics so small. Like, I have no intention of publishing this formally, right? If anything, I would say, please credit me if you decide to use this content. Don't publish it for yourself and put it out there for people. But yeah, like, I kind of want to just focus as long as I can on the lore of the world and not so much stress those mechanics. Like, I want to just say, these are the races of the world, period. And then when I'm ready to run,
factions,
when I'm ready to run my game, I will then plug in the system to those races. But I don't really want to get hung up on the D&D mechanics of the world so much as I just want to build the world.
That's something. Have the players just build their character concept first without having rules.
That works too. Yeah.
Here's the setting. Here are the races. Here are the clans with their backstory. Build your character's backstory from that, and you then give them. Here are the pools. Now, here's the rules. Make it fit your backstory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Lex points out, make the setting as system agnostic as possible. Yeah, I kind of like that idea, honestly. I really do. I like the idea that you could just pick up this book and read about it, and you're like reading about a world, right? It's not a D&D world. It's a world, right? And then you can decide, oh yeah, this is I'd love to run adventures in this world. And then you kind of make it match whatever game you're running.
That's how you've done it before with your own stuff. I mean, you see a setting you like.
Yeah.
Modify it to how you want, and then build it to whatever system you're running at the time.
That's true. Yeah, like I took Skull and Shackles, the actual Paizo Pathfinder 1E adventure, and I converted it over to 5th edition D&D, and then since then, we kind of deviated from the script. Red Hand of Doom, 3.5 edition D&D, turned that into a 5th edition game. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities to do that. Took Hero Quest, right? Hero Quest is a fucking board game for 10-year-olds. Turned that into a 14 session D&D campaign. So I won't have a problem at all converting what's made to the system that I need it to be. I just don't want to slow down the design process by worrying about system mechanics as I'm building. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. It does.
Yeah. So.
So definitely things to consider. I mean,
yeah. All right. It has been an hour. We have certainly spoiled a lot of Castlevania. Not as much spoiling of Castlevania as I wanted, but mostly I wanted to spoil it in regards to how it's influencing my desire to play tabletop. And hopefully this gets people curious about story-based, dice pool-driven systems, and they check them out, because I love D&D. I've played D&D since I was 13 years old, which is a very long time, and I play D&D all the fucking time. I've played every edition of D&D. I started with 2nd edition. I went back to 1st edition to try that out too. I've tried every edition of D&D. Played Pathfinder. Haven't played Pathfinder 2e. I'm here to tell you that D&D is great, but there are other systems to play and enjoy, and they offer different things. So.
I don't know if you ever met Chris Rubenstahl.
Mm-mm.
Okay. He was a DM of mine from way back from my Sunday game group I used to have, and I've played a ton of different game systems through him. Yeah. He's the one who actually had the Marvel books.
Oh, nice.
It has that system you're talking about where, he gets points, and you can give him points.
Right. You say like, no, I did succeed, and then the DM's like, cool, and then they have that to use, later on, kind of deal. So
exactly. Yeah. They can use it against you later. But if they get to use that dice to do something against your character, to spin things in their favor, then somebody can grab that from the hero side.
Lex Codex. I don't know. I haven't actually looked up Codex gaming system. I know that if you're really into storytelling and minimal dice, you should look into Fate. Fate is pretty much just everybody's make-believing, and then you have a couple of dice that you roll, and that's it. So, but yeah, there's so many other systems to try and play. I think that this discussion, I think that the 4 seasons of Castlevania, I think the work that's been done so far in the campaign is definitely pushing me personally into making the setting itself system agnostic, and then the game that I plan to run will be probably a World of Darkness based game. So.
Or look into the Mutants and Mastermind system. Like Champions.
That was very good. Yeah.
That was very roleplay intuitive. Like, they just give you very general settings to put your points into, and then you thematically flavor it however you will. So you have a power pool for
my other thing is, and this is running a little bit late now, but my other thing is, if you're running a storytelling based game and the combat is supposed to be evocative, right, of anime style combats or over the top battles and things like that, do you bother with a map? Do you bother with minis? Or do you just have set pieces, like art and stuff in the background, and everybody's just on their webcams and they're just talking and they're telling the story and they're rolling the dice and they're interpreting the dice and they're telling the story? Or do you still need the map? Do you still need the minis to touch and move around? Or is everything just theater of the mind? You know what I'm saying?
If you were meeting in person, I would just do theater of the mind. But since you were doing the online play, I would definitely have a map, just so you can get a sense of, okay, what do you see? What do you not see?
Maybe maybe early Critical Role. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Where measurements are not exact.
Right. Matt would just be like, "Yeah, you're fast. You could make it to here."
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how it was back in the day when they first started doing it. His little hand drawn maps on the white pieces of paper.
Eyeball everything, and just enough as a visual, essentially just a.
Yeah, that could work, right? Okay, so you move over here, and there's all these guys over here. And then you're still over here. New guys are showing up from here. So it's just enough that you can kind of get grounded in what's happening, but not,
And no matter theater of the mind, what you got, when you have that giant token in the middle of a screen because something just popped out of nowhere. There's something there that pulls at your core just seeing that visually.
Yeah. I'd also kind of like if we were doing a storytelling game to get all the players to do web cameras, because I feel like the human faces could add a lot, especially if there's horror elements to it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And a lot of role play heavy or just big descriptions of what's going on. So,
Well, I mean, how much is like you were saying off camera if you're using push to talk or something and you forget to hit the button? Like those expressions of wow or oh my gosh or
oh yeah, right, yeah. We get comments from people on videos that are like, how come no one ever laughs in your games? Because like I feel like the stuff that's happening is pretty
much. And I have to start reminding myself to actually hit the button while I'm laughing.
Yeah. They're like the game's really funny. Why does nobody ever laugh? And it's like, well, everyone's laughing, but we all use push to talk, so you don't really get to hear anybody laughing. And I kind of, when I hear that, I kind of feel bad, but then I think about Gyoza's milkshake, and then I'm like, if I never have to hear Gyoza's milkshake again, it's worth it. Yeah. So any sacrifice is worth never hearing Gyoza's milkshake again. Let's see. Have maps to catch eyes, and for bigger rooms and stuff, you could do a background art and a full-on big image for the character. Yeah, I mean, if it's a big-ass solo fight, I could just be like, yo, this is where you're fighting, and this is what you're fighting. Let's do this shit.
Oh my gosh, do it like video games, the scrollers where you have the person pop up on the screen.
Yeah.
Like the old tactics and stuff where the person's portrait would appear when they're talking.
That could be cool too, yeah, if we didn't want to do. Or just for like when I'm talking, I could throw the art up of the person that's talking. It would be a little bit, yeah. These are all things to think about. All right, I'm going to get something to eat, and I'm also super duper tired because I'm still sick. So thank you so much for hanging out and helping me think all this through, and also helping me spoil Castlevania for anyone who accidentally watches this and doesn't read the giant spoiler background. And thank you guys in chat for hanging out. There's some really good ideas. I feel much better moving forward about this Gothic Horror campaign and trying to capture that feeling that I've been chasing since I saw Netflix Castlevania for the first time. So, all right, guys. Have a good evening, and I will see you next time.
Have a great one.